Welcome to High Capacity, the podcast that helps you expand your nervous system's capacity so you can have the career and the family and the goals and actually enjoy them. I'm your host, Michelle Grosser. I'm a trial attorney turned nervous system strategist. If your life is full by every measure and your nervous system is feeling it, this is your show. Every Tuesday, I'm here to unpack the nervous system science behind why you feel wired, overwhelmed, and depleted, and give you real tools to actually do something about it. Let's dive in. It's Michelle here, and welcome to High Capacity. Holy moly, this has been a long time coming. I'm so excited. Same show, same me, same mission, and just a little name upgrade that finally says what we're actually doing here. So, as we've been talking a lot about expanding our capacity in the last few months, when you guys are here, we're talking about high capacity, and we're not talking about hustle culture. We're not talking about, going from the moment you wake up until your head hits the pillow at night. I'm not talking about optimizing every hour, doing more than, any human reasonably should. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the wrong place, and please rest. I'm talking about high capacity. I'm talking about having a full life, a real, demanding, meaningful, sometimes chaotic life. And instead of constantly trying to shrink that life or constantly feeling overwhelmed by that life, learning how to expand what your nervous system can hold, right? Becoming more resilient. That's it. That's the whole mission. And as I've been thinking about this and the ways in which I want to explain and teach what we do here at High Capacity, it brought me back to sophomore year in college. And tell me if this lands with you too. So I remember having this moment where I would open my camera app on my phone, and I got that dreaded notification that there was low storage, right? So I went to take a photo and I was out of space. And in that moment, we really had two choices. Option one was I was constantly going through my photos and videos and everything on my phone and just deleting, right? Agonizing over which pictures I wanted to keep, which ones I could live without, deleting apps that I hadn't used in the last few months, that whole digital purge. And then when I went to use my phone, I knew that any moment I might hit that notification again, right? So I was constantly monitoring and then reacting when that popped up. And the problem is that I never actually solved the underlying issue, right? I was just managing my storage space until the next time that the notification popped up on my phone that I was maxed out and couldn't take any more photos until I cleaned stuff out. That's option number one. Option number two was that I could walk myself to the cell phone store and trade in my existing phone for one with more storage. And, sure, I might still have to clear out duplicate photos occasionally, but I wasn't white knuckling it every time I opened my camera, right? Everything was just running more efficiently. I was doing essentially the same thing, but from a completely different energy. The capacity was just there, right? I wasn't waiting on edge to kind of hit that limit again. And I think this perfectly describes what we do here at High Capacity, because most approaches to stress, overwhelm, anxiety, dysregulation, time management, those are all option one. They're deletion strategies. They help you manage what's already there. But the moment you hit your limit again, which usually doesn't take long, you're back to the notification, right? No more storage room. We're maxed out, tapped out, at capacity. What we do here is option two, right? We're not here to help you manage your stress a little bit better. I'm here to teach you how to expand your operating system so that the life that you live, that you've worked so hard to build, these amazing things that you have in your life, these amazing people and responsibilities that you have in your life aren't always maxing you out. And that expansion, the way I look at it, and I've been thinking about it, is I see it happening across 5 specific areas. So I want to teach you how to expand your emotional capacity, your stress capacity, your physical and energetic capacity, your relational capacity, and then finally, your joy capacity. 5 areas where I think all of our nervous systems can learn to hold more and feel more and really function with so much more ease than it probably is right now. Okay. So a couple quick things, just nuts and bolts about the show before we get into the meat of today's content. So today, Tuesday episodes are going to continue exactly as they've been, right? We're going to take deep dives. I'll share some stories about what's going on that I think will be helpful for you. We're going to talk about nervous system. These are the kinds of episodes that you put on when you're commuting or when you're on a walk or when you're cleaning your house or when you're working out and you come out feeling like something's shifted. Love those episodes. We're going to keep doing that. And then new on Friday. So even we're starting it this Friday, April, what is that? The 17th. We're calling it high capacity Fridays. But these are going to be really short episodes, 5-7 minutes ish. And the idea here is I want to give you one really practical tool, one specific invitation to expand your capacity in one of these 5 areas for the week ahead. So the idea is you would listen on Friday. I would give you one action item that you would put into practice in the following week, right? So if you wanted to start over the weekend, awesome. If there's anything you wanted to prep, get your head around over the weekend and then start it on Monday, awesome. But the idea is that you would tune in on Friday to get your action item for the week ahead. And these are going to be no fluff, no lengthy build up, just one thing you can actually do with a clear explanation of why it works and what you're going to notice when it does. Because I think the internet, podcast, apps, social media are so full of information. When I started teaching about this 4 or 5 years ago, no one was really talking about the nervous system, and now it's everywhere, right? Information is out there. You guys can go Google and ChatGPT, anything you would need to know about the nervous system. That's not why you're here. You're here because where there's a gap is in integration, right? We all know a lot of things, and that knowledge can be helpful. But if we're not doing anything with that knowledge, if we're not actually putting it into practice and taking action, who cares, right? Who cares? We're not going to experience life any differently. So the idea is that you learn on Tuesdays and then you come back on Friday for a really quick hit of hey, this is a little thing I want you to practice this coming week. I want you to feel how your life changes when you start to actually put this stuff into practice, right? So that starts this Friday. So come back for it. It's going to be great. Okay, now I want to talk about capacity patterns. I've been alluding to this a lot. These are, let's talk about what they are. Your capacity pattern, we all have a capacity pattern. There are 5. Your capacity pattern isn't a measure of how much capacity you have. It's actually the pattern that your nervous system automatically defaults to when you've reached your limit. So when you're at capacity, right? You cannot handle any more stimulation, stress, responsibility, demands. You're just I'm done. I'm at my limit. My nervous system cannot handle anymore. What does your nervous system automatically default to when you're feeling overwhelmed? Okay. It does something specific. It does something that it learned to do really early in life, because at some point, that response, that automatic response, helped you feel more in control, safer, better connected to the people that you loved, whatever. And it worked. And because it worked, your nervous system, like a little library, right, filed it away and was like, ooh, when we did that, it brought us this result. That was good. Let's do that again. And then it happens again, right? And it happens over and over and over until it becomes such an automatic response that it actually doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It feels like, oh, this is just how I am, right? I'm just type A. I'm just the strong silent type. I'm just a control freak. I'm just a perfectionist. I'm just a people pleaser, or whatever it is. That automatic response is your capacity pattern. Most people will probably recognize themselves immediately in one of them. I'm going to go through all 5 of them now. You might hear yourself in one as a primary pattern, and then you might see parts of another pattern as possibly your secondary pattern that shows up when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And I'm telling you guys, I went on such a deep dive with these for the last few years. It's one of my favorite things to teach about because it's so fascinating. Once you see your primary and then secondary patterns, I'm telling you, you cannot unsee it. It's so fascinating. Okay, so let's go through all 5 capacity patterns and then we'll kind of wrap it back up. Again, before we jump in, when I'm talking about capacity patterns, I'm talking about the things that you automatically do when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, okay? So when you're feeling grounded and present and regulated, these may not land. So as you're listening, right, put yourself in that place of being like, when was the last time that you just felt like I'm done? This is too much. Like I'm so overwhelmed. And then you probably dropped into pattern. That's where these are going to start to feel familiar. Okay, so the first pattern, I called it the navigator. When the navigator hits capacity, bam, they leave. Okay, this is a pattern of exit. So they're always, I call it the navigator because they're kind of always looking for a way around, a way out, another route, another path, somewhere else to be. Okay, and it's not always physically. It might be, right? Maybe when you've been stressed, overwhelmed, uncomfortable before, you have physically left. You've physically left jobs. You've physically left relationships. You've physically left the room. You're like, I got to get out of here. I got to go take a walk or just lock myself in the car for a minute or something. Okay. So physically sometimes, but not always. Sometimes you're leaving mentally, right? You're present, like you're physically there, but your mind is somewhere else. Maybe it's energetic. Maybe you just disconnect from your body and you kind of drift somewhere that feels less intense or less overwhelming, right? Maybe you're just kind of spacing out, dissociating. Maybe you start daydreaming. You kind of go to a fantasy world. All of that is very true for the navigator. So if you tend to run the navigator pattern when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, a lot of times that's the word actually that navigators that I've worked with use to describe life. They're like, everything just feels, I'm always overwhelmed. Like, why does it feel like if I look around, it's easier for everyone else? It feels like everyone else can handle it. But what just feels like normal life stress for me is super overwhelming. That's common for the navigator. The world around you maybe doesn't always feel entirely safe. You'd rather just be with animals, or you'd rather just be out in nature by yourself because you always kind of feel a little bit like a misfit here in your body in the present moment. You can probably process information really rapidly, but you might still get easily overwhelmed by just too much input. Anxiety is really common for the navigator. Fear, really kind of like the companion there, emotion, common for the navigator. And then when things get hard, right? Anytime it feels too overwhelming, too intense, it's coming too fast or too loud, or there's going to be conflict or something going on here. That pattern, the first instinct for your nervous system is to find a way out of the intensity, not toward it. So that's the first capacity pattern, the navigator. The second capacity pattern is what I call the caretaker. When the caretaker feels stressed, overwhelmed, dysregulated, hits capacity, their automatic response is to give. Okay. If you run this pattern, you've probably felt this. The minute anything feels uncomfortable, your attention immediately turns outward. You're taking care of everyone else's needs, their moods. You're monitoring everyone's moods, making sure that they're okay. How can you make them happy? How can you make sure that they're good? You make sure everyone else is comfortable, because staying connected to people is what makes you feel best, makes you feel safest. So if this is your pattern, the thought of not being connected to someone or to a small group of people, your people, right? That's really scary. That can feel really empty. So you work really hard to keep everyone around you happy. Maybe saying no for you is something you've been working on, but it's really hard. Maybe you really fear disappointing people or rejection or abandonment, even more than most people might even realize. My caretakers, you're probably this really warm, talkative, generous person. You love physical touch. You tend to like lose yourself in other people's needs without noticing that it's even happening. Maybe you are often wondering, like, are they happy? Are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Do people really like me? That's a common thought pattern for the caretaker. But somewhere underneath all of that giving, oftentimes what I notice with my caretakers is that there's a quiet kind of resentment building under there, because you're taking care of everyone else and it feels like they don't reciprocate, right? But they're not like doing that for me in turn. And it feels uncomfortable to kind of talk about that, because as a caretaker, you don't have any needs. You meet everyone else's needs. So if that lands, I would love to hear from you about the caretaker. Then the third pattern is called the anchor. The anchor, when you hit capacity, if you run this pattern, when you're feeling dysregulated, when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you hunker down. Okay? That's why you're the anchor. You hunker down. You pull all your energy in. Maybe you even get quiet, kind of stay small. You just endure and you wait for the storm to pass. So if this is your pattern, a lot of times what I hear from my anchors is like, life feels heavy, right? Like everything feels harder for me than it does for everyone else. Like, why does it feel like I move through life? It's like I'm trudging through molasses, but it feels like everyone else can just go about their life and it feels like it's a lot easier for them. My anchors, you guys probably hold an enormous invisible weight. You can just carry it, right? People come to you and they love to vent. They trust you because you can just hold an incredible amount. You might have a hard time talking about your feelings, identifying your feelings, putting them into words, because everything is just like held in. You're kind of armored. And the thought of expressing yourself is like, nope, not going to happen, right? Because that means I have to be seen. And that means, someone has to like pay attention to me. And I don't like any of that. If you run this pattern, the anchor pattern, you probably hate being rushed. You might much prefer to just fly under the radar. You like to be like a supporting role instead of the main character energy. You don't want to draw attention. You do hate being rushed, but also you're just kind of slow to act generally. Like you're methodical. It's not because you don't care. It's not because like you're slow. It's because your nervous system just needs more time. It needs time to feel safe. It needs to make sure that this is what you actually want to do before you can move. You probably, for that same reason, tend to resist authority, maybe just quietly. But there's probably this sense of like, you can't make me, or like a stubbornness. If anyone has ever described you as stubborn, or you've even seen that in yourself, that is so true for the anchor. It can be so true for the anchor. And self-expression, right? Saying what you actually think, speaking your mind, right? Speaking up when things feel like they're not right or they're unjust. Speaking up when about how you actually feel about something, that can feel genuinely unsafe for the anchor. So that's a great expansion point. That's a great expansion edge for anchors. All right, 2 more. The fourth capacity pattern is what I call the warrior. So when the warrior is feeling overwhelmed or stressed or fearful of anything, when they hit capacity, what do? The warrior, they're fighters. The warrior takes control. They push harder, right? They lean in. They handle it. They take charge. They refuse to need anyone, right? They're so hyper independent because in their nervous system's experience, needing someone or needing something and not getting it was really painful, right? That you were taught pretty early on that I can't rely on other people. So I'm going to be the one I can rely on. I'm going to be the smartest one. I'm going to be the strongest one. I'm going to be the most capable one. I'm going to be hyper independent so that I can just rely on me, because at the end of the day, that's all I feel I can rely on. So if that lands, if this is maybe your primary or maybe your secondary pattern, what are some traits of the warrior? You probably have a really great BS detector, right? Like you can smell that from a mile away and you're not scared to call it out. You're probably super street smart. You're probably really self-reliant. Again, in that same vein, you kind of doubt whether you can really trust other people or depend on other people. For that reason, vulnerability can feel really threatening to you. Asking for help, probably something you don't tend to do often. In fact, this might be something that you rarely do because you really value competence enormously. You value competence in yourself. You value competence in other people. You would prefer to just lead, fight to the finish, right? Underneath all that strength, though, there's a cost. And for the warrior, all of that hyper independence and being the one who like leads and fills up the space and gets it done. Oftentimes what I notice with my warriors is that there's almost like a loneliness that can come. Also like maybe even a resentment that you're always the person who has to handle everything and get everything done. There's like a tension there. It's like, I want to be the one who does everything. And I don't want to have to rely on anyone else or ask for help. But at the same time, I wish that I had help and I didn't have to do everything by myself, right? There's a lot of tension there. And then finally, the last capacity pattern in this archetype framework that I've created is the architect. When the architect feels stressed, dysregulated, overwhelmed, at capacity, they start controlling. They control their environment. Order is so important, right? Things have to be orderly, structure. If you've ever heard yourself saying like, yeah, but I really thrive in structure. I need some structure, right? I can't concentrate right now because this house is a mess, or I can't concentrate until I clean up the kitchen or I clean my desk. Maybe this is a primary or secondary pattern for you, right? Doing things correctly and doing them well is super important to the architect, because somewhere along the way, your nervous system learned that safety comes from having things handled in the right way, in the appropriate way, in the best way. And that's your pattern. Disorder probably genuinely creates anxiety for you, or like a restlessness, a discomfort. So you clean up when you're upset. Maybe you hate being late. You probably because you like order and structure so much, maybe you even, again, this is when you're dysregulated, right? Probably tend to avoid anything that feels spontaneous or unplanned. Perfectionism is a familiar companion to you. You probably, like the warrior capacity pattern, you also highly value competence. You value achievement. You value like what people are thinking and from the outside looking in, right? You probably judge your own feelings, and there's this filter that everything has to kind of go through. And if it's appropriate, then it's allowed to express. And if it doesn't feel valid, right? Or if you don't think you have a right to be disappointed or sad or angry or what have you, then that just kind of gets suppressed. This is a pattern that can be highly performative. Ask me how I know. You're probably well-dressed and well-mannered and well-behaved. And slowing down can feel really uncomfortable, wrong even, in a way that's kind of hard to explain. It's like, if you know, you know. And you probably, because of that, you stay busy. And not only because there's so much to do, but because, again, your nervous system has been conditioned that being busy feels safer than being still. Okay, so that's like a little snapshot of the architect. I would love to hear which of these resonates most for you. Maybe you've heard yourself clearly in one of these. Maybe, I don't know, one or two or even three of them kind of pulled at you and you saw aspects of yourself in them. But while you're sitting with it, turning it over, right? If you're not quite sure, my brand new quiz called What's Your Capacity Pattern is now finally live. I'm so excited about it. It's linked in the show notes. So go ahead, click the link in the show notes. It'll probably take you 2 or 3 minutes to complete. I think there's 15 questions. You'll go through them. Don't worry, don't overthink it. Just kind of click on the response that feels most true. There's going to be some where you're like, well, none of these feel exactly like me. That's okay. Just choose the one that feels the most true. And here's what I want you to understand about why it matters. Right now, you are probably navigating your stress, your overwhelm, your reactions, your exhaustion, without really knowing why your nervous system responds the way that it does, right? So you know that you get overwhelmed. You know that you snap or you shut down or you push through or you people please, all of that stuff, right? But maybe the why has felt a little murky. Like you can kind of start to see the edges of this pattern, but you can't quite name it. This quiz is going to help you name it in a really specific nervous system based, like this is why you do what you do kind of way that generic personality tests don't even come close to. And then here's the second thing. What expands capacity for a warrior is going to be different than what expands it for any other pattern, right? Let's say than for a caretaker. The way that a navigator needs to learn how to stay in their body, like present, is really different from what an anchor needs to learn in order to, gain momentum and not self-sabotage and learn to express themselves. So one size fits all advice doesn't really work here because you're not a one size fits all human. You're not a one size fits all nervous system. So this quiz really helps to give you a personalized map. It's not just this general wellness prescription. And then the third thing, and this is the thing I hear most often from people who've gone through this work, is that there's a specific feeling that happens when you finally see your pattern clearly. And it's not shame, and it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm so messed up, or I'm so broken, or, my childhood. Like, no, it's just like, oh, like this makes so much sense, right? I'm not failing at life. I'm not too sensitive or too controlling or too needy or too much, or like whatever label. It's that you're just patterned, right? Your nervous system has learned to do these things for a reason. And that shift from self-judgment to understanding, guys, that's where everything starts to change. So when you get your result from the quiz, it's really cool. It's going to unlock a free private podcast for you called The Capacity Code. That has a dedicated episode for your specific capacity pattern. You're going to learn where it came from. You're going to learn a little bit about how it's running your life right now. You're going to learn a little bit about what expansion actually looks like for your nervous system specifically. So go take the quiz right now. The quiz link is in the show notes. It's free, it's fast, and I genuinely think it's going to be one of the most clarifying things you've probably done this year thus far. So welcome to High Capacity. I'm so glad you're here. Be sure to subscribe to the show so you can join us on Friday for our High Cap Fridays. I love y'all so much. I'll talk to you soon.
If you love Mommy's Polygraphs, leave a review.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you haven't taken the What's Your Capacity Pattern quiz yet, that is your next step. It'll tell you which of the 5 capacity patterns is driving your dysregulation, your exhaustion, your reactions, your stress, all of it. So you know exactly where to focus your energy first. It's free. It'll take you 2 minutes. The link for the quiz is in the show notes. And then come back on Friday for one practical tool, the high cap move to take into your week, because putting the stuff into practice is what is actually going to change things. All right, I'll see you on Friday.